chọn lớp, chọn yêu thương, chọn hạnh phúc.
Trước nhu cầu thực tế về mong muốn tìm kiếm con đường xây dựng trường học hạnh phúc của nhiều thầy cô giáo và nhà trường trên cả nước, tháng 9 năm 2022, kênh truyền hình giáo dục quốc gia VTV7, Đài truyền hình Việt Nam và thương hiệu Love, hạnh phúc là lựa chọn của công ty cổ phần sữa quốc tế IDP cùng với sự đồng hành của Bộ Giáo dục và Đào tạo đã tổ chức hội thảo thay đổi vì một trường học hạnh phúc với chủ đề Chọn yêu thương, chọn hạnh phúc tại thành phố biển Đà Nẵng. 400 hiệu trưởng và các nhà quản lý giáo dục, lãnh đạo các sở giáo dục đến từ 50 tỉnh thành trên cả nước đã tham dự. Hội thảo thay đổi vì một trường học hạnh phúc, chủ đề Chọn yêu thương, chọn hạnh phúc sẽ cùng bàn luận tới các chủ đề sau. Mục tiêu thực sự của giáo dục là gì? Vì sao chúng ta cần thay đổi, cải cách giáo dục? Nó đã trở nên cấp thiết đến mức độ nào? Thay đổi, cải cách giáo dục một cách thực chất là thay đổi điều gì? Làm thế nào để thay đổi và cải cách giáo dục? Hội thảo cũng sẽ trao đổi về chủ đề hạnh phúc thật sự là gì, vì sao và làm thế nào để thực hành hạnh phúc trong giáo dục, đưa hạnh phúc vào trong trường học. Chúng ta sẽ cùng nghe giáo sư Hà Vĩnh Thọ đến từ Học viện Học tập về hạnh phúc và an lạc Eurasia, nguyên giám đốc chương trình Tổng hạnh phúc quốc gia Bhutan, cố vấn đặc biệt của dự án trường học hạnh phúc với bài trình bày hạnh phúc thật sự là gì, làm thế nào để thực hành hạnh phúc trong giáo dục.
Welcome back, everyone. So I was telling to Professor Petro in the break that it's amazing because we come from very different backgrounds, we have had very different life experiences, but we came to the same conclusion. So we feel that we are very much on the same wavelength. So it's very easy for me to pick up where I left and continue the presentation. I came to Vietnam for the first time 40 years ago. So although my father was Vietnamese, I had never been in Vietnam. I grew up abroad, and I arrived in Vietnam in 1982. I landed in Hanoi in 1982. And you remember, only the old ones among you remember Hanoi 1982. The war had been over only 7 years. There was still a lot of destruction. And it touched my heart so deeply when I saw the situation of the country and specifically the situation of the children. And at that time, I made myself the promise, if there's anything I can do to help the children in Vietnam, I will do my best to do it. A few weeks ago, I was back in Hanoi, exactly 40 years after my first visit. It's almost impossible to believe that it's the same city. So what has happened in these 40 years is a kind of a miracle. But let me go back to 40 years ago, because I had two very important meetings that really gave the direction to my work. It was my uncle, Mr. Haven Lao, who invited me to come to Vietnam. At that time, he was ambassador of Vietnam in Paris, and he often came to Geneva. I lived near Geneva, and we were working with my wife in the field of special education. I was the director of a teacher training college. And also we had children with special needs living in our family. And when my uncle saw that, he said, you have to come and help the children in Vietnam. And the other very important meeting was with Dr. Nguyen Quoc Vien, who I knew his book, Vietnam, A Long History. He's a very famous historian. But I didn't know that he was actually a medical doctor and a child psychologist. So I met with him in Hanoi. And he told me the following. He told me, now that the country is reunified, we have to put our focus on the well-being of the children. So that was 40 years ago. So the seed had been planted 40 years ago. And sometimes it takes time for seeds to become trees and flowers and fruits. But I think now it has become almost like a forest. I would like also to acknowledge and really pay respect to what the teachers have done in Vietnam for so many years, because even in the time where the situation was so difficult and there was much poverty and a lot of danger, always the teachers continued to do their job. Just going to school was an act of courage because it was dangerous to go to school. But the teachers continued to do it. And if they had not done it, Vietnam would have not been able to rebuild as fast and as well as it did. So we have also to acknowledge the wonderful achievements of Vietnamese education system. And let us look at a few statistics that show that even today, education system in Vietnam is achieving pretty well. If you compare the achievements, for instance, in the PISA, you know, when you compare educational system worldwide, you see that Vietnam, for instance, in science, is ranking very high, higher than a very rich country like UK. And so we also have to acknowledge that teachers have done a very good job. At the same time, we see that in terms of well-being, in terms of mental health, in terms of happiness, there are some problems, and we also need to acknowledge that. And Professor Pectro has shown very clearly how now we are facing a new challenge. Yeah, so the old challenge, we were very good at mastering. The new challenge, we need to change very deeply our mindset. If we want the students not only to be academically successful, but to be really fulfilled human beings. And I would like to show the background of the idea of happy school. Because a very significant report was written by the UNESCO, and it was the Southeast Asia Bureau of UNESCO, so the part of the United Nations that is in charge of education. And they looked at Southeast Asian countries, and they noticed that many Southeast Asian countries have very high academic achievements, like South Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, and so on. But the well-being of the students is not that good. So there's a discrepancy between high academic achievement and low happiness and well-being. And as Dr. Pectro has very clearly expressed, if we don't take care of the emotional and mental health of the children, they will not be able to face the challenges of tomorrow. So you see the challenge of creating happy school is not only a Vietnamese challenge. It's really the next phase of the development of education worldwide. But I believe that when I see this whole, Vietnam can become a pioneer. And if you become a pioneer, then in the same way that many countries, where many people around the world were so impressed by the way Vietnam managed to develop, that's the next step, that you could show the way in the way developing not only the economy, but really the happiness of the teachers, the students, and therefore of the whole of society. And our own experience in Vietnam started in the field of special education, so with children with special needs, especially mental disabilities, intellectual problems, behavioral problems. And that was very interesting, because with these kind of children, you cannot focus only on academic skills, because many of them, for them, is very difficult to reach. So we had to have a much more holistic approach of education. And through working for decades with this kind of children, we understood, we get really a hands-on experience of how to approach holistic education, not just intellectual education. Holistic education means educating the head, the heart, and the hand. And we created a community in Hue, the Peaceful Bamboo Family, where we could explore, like a prototype, like a lab. We could explore how to do that practically, both with children with special needs and also with many, many children of the public schools in Hue. So what I want to emphasize is not just a nice idea, somehow a kind of utopia. It's something that can be done. We have already done it. Dr. Pectro has done it. And all of you can do it.
Các thầy cô giáo, các nhà quản lý giáo dục và các khán giả đang theo dõi bài trình bày của giáo sư Hà Vĩnh Thọ về hạnh phúc thật sự là gì, làm thế nào để thực hành hạnh phúc trong giáo dục. Trong khuôn khổ hội thảo thay đổi vì một trường học hạnh phúc với chủ đề Chọn yêu thương, chọn hạnh phúc được tổ chức tại Đà Nẵng. Để có thể đưa hạnh phúc vào trường học, chúng ta cần hiểu rõ ràng và thấu đáo về hạnh phúc, cho dù đó là một phạm trù chủ quan và cá nhân. Chúng ta hãy cùng tiếp tục theo dõi.
So when we speak about happiness in the school and so on, oftentimes people ask, but what do you mean with happiness? Happiness is something very subjective, very personal. How can you, implement happiness in schools? So in order to answer this question, we have to understand what do we mean by happiness in the context of education. So we should not mistake true happiness with superficial pleasure, self-centered, egoistic pleasure like consuming more or showing off our fancy clothes or being the most popular guy or girl on the social media, something like that. This is not what we're speaking about. I worked in Bhutan for the Bhutanese government that has put happiness as the goal of the government action. And we did a lot of research on what does happiness actually mean. We consulted the best experts worldwide, and then we tried to summarize everything we had understood in a simple formula. And this is the simple formula. True happiness has three main components. The first one is to live in harmony and to know how to take care of ourselves. It means self-knowledge, emotional self-awareness, understanding our own strengths and weaknesses, being clear about our values, our aspirations, our dreams. So to take the time to look inward, not being completely lost in the outer world. The second point is to live in harmony and to care for others and for society. And we know from a lot of research that the quality of human relationships is actually the strongest predictor for happiness, well-being, mental health, physical health, and even life expectancy. And this connects to what Professor Petro has said before. Social and emotional skills, they are skills. Therefore, they can be learned and they can be taught. So human relationships are not simply random. We can teach children from young age on how to create good, meaningful relationship based on trust, respect, friendship, and love. And that's a central part of education. And finally, living in harmony and caring for nature, for our beautiful but very fragile planet. We know that we live in a time of ecological challenges, climate change, pollution. And if we want the future to be happy, of course we have to teach children how to take care of the planet. Three fundamental components of happiness, living in harmony with self, with others, and natures, are the core of a happy school curriculum. As we have heard from Professor Petro, these are not things that you can simply intellectually teach. You have to embody them. So for the principals, for the teachers, there are 4 stages. The first one, you have to understand. Why is it important? What is it about? That's stage number 1, understanding. Stage number 2 is practicing. It's not something that you are, but you have to practice it, like emotional awareness, empathy, compassion. These things have to be practiced. So it takes a time to really take them in, practice. So understanding, practice. Stage number 3, embodying. As teachers, as principals, as educators, we have to display these qualities when we stand in front of our students, of our children. If we just say it, but we act differently, it's not convincing. We have to be what we want to teach. And the stage number 4 is implementing it together, because social and emotional skills is not something one can do alone. We need a community. So I hope this will become a community who works together to implement together, who support each other. It's important to understand that these ideas that we want to share, they are not just a sort of a ideology or something that we made up or some kind of religion or belief. No, they are evidence-based. Everything we are trying to convey is evidence-based. We have very serious, strong scientific research to back up what we are saying. And one of the examples is Daniel Goleman. He's a very well-known psychologist in the US. He's the one who really promoted the notion of emotional intelligence. And here in this picture, he's explaining that to the World Economic Forum. Maybe you have heard the World Economic Forum is one of the highest sort of gathering in the world where all the heads of states and heads of biggest corporations get together. So even at that very high level, emotional intelligence is really a theme. So Professor Pectro was saying about the what and the how. And the how is about understanding what emotional intelligence is made of. So these are 5 fundamental skills that we can develop and that we can implement personally, at home, in the family, in the classroom, in the school, and in the overall system. And the first one is self-awareness. And an important part of self-awareness is emotional self-awareness. Because, as we have heard in the previous lecture, in order to be able to empathize with someone else's emotions, we need to be aware first of our own emotions. And we are not used to that. We have not practiced it. So self-awareness, self-knowledge is the very first component of emotional intelligence. And this leads to the second skill, which is self-management, self-transformation, which means when I have a very difficult emotion like anger or sadness or jealousy, how do I deal with that? Am I simply overwhelmed by my emotions, or do I know how to manage my emotions? So imagine if children are taught from a very young age how to manage their emotion properly, it makes a huge difference. And tomorrow we will show you some practical methods how to do that. And the other side of emotional management is how do we learn to cultivate consciously positive states of mind that generate positive emotions such as gratitude, kindness, generosity, and so on. So it can be cultivated, it can be trained. And we will also speak about methods to train these positive states of mind that generate joy and happiness and well-being. And this then is the foundation on which we can cultivate the third ability, which is social awareness. And we heard already about empathy. Empathy is a natural capacity inborn in every human being because of the way our brain is structured, because of the so-called mirror neurons. So even a newborn baby looks at its mother and reflects the emotion of the mother. Yeah, you see the mother is holding the baby, she's smiling, and the baby will smile. The mother is sad, and you will see it reflected. So empathy is a natural capacity. So it's natural, but we can cultivate it. So it becomes much stronger, much more precise. And later, we can see empathy can have 3 different components. The first one is emotional empathy. We are able to feel what other people are feeling. The second one is cognitive empathy. We are able to understand other people's ideas, even they are different from mine. I'm not right away blocking if somebody says something I don't agree with. I can understand why is he or she thinking like that. So if we can do that, the dialogue is possible. There's much less conflict. And the third dimension of empathy is active compassion. When I see somebody in need, I feel motivated to help. So these 3 can be trained, and it should be part of every curriculum. because this leads to our ability to create good social connections, the fourth one. And as I said before, we have a lot of research evidence. The strongest one was a research conducted by Harvard University over 75 years that tried to understand what were the strongest elements that contribute to a good, healthy life, happy life, and the result was very clear. The quality of human relationship is more important than money, more important than fame, more important than social position, more important than everything else. To have a happy, fulfilled, healthy life, we need to have good social connection, friendship and love, trust and respect. We need to feel that we belong to a social body. And we know that in Vietnamese culture, this was very strong. Life in the village, people were very connected. Extended family, people were very connected. But we see now with modernization, urbanization, this is slowly disappearing. People are more lonely, isolated. So now, before it was like natural, now we have to teach it. And if we have that, then it will naturally lead to the fifth skill, which is ethical, responsible decision-making. You see, if we are not able to pass on to our children, our students, good, ethical, moral values, then all the rest will collapse. A society without ethics, without moral values, cannot really survive. So really being able to not only say, but embody good ethical social values and making ethical choices is something crucial for the future of the country.
Giáo sư Hà Vĩnh Thọ đã giúp chúng ta hiểu về 3 mức độ kết nối của hạnh phúc thực sự, 5 năng lực có thể rèn luyện được của trí thông minh cảm xúc, năng lực giúp mang lại hạnh phúc trong trường học và trong đời sống. Hạnh phúc là một kỹ năng có thể học được và có thể dạy được, nhưng cũng đòi hỏi cần phải có sự rèn luyện và thực hành nên sẽ cần thời gian, không thực sự dễ dàng. Tại sao lại như vậy? Có điều gì là nền tảng cho việc rèn luyện và thực hành những kỹ năng này? Chúng ta sẽ cùng tiếp tục lắng nghe.
And now we can ask ourselves, so is there one skill that can help us develop all these 5 skills? A kind of foundation for all these other skills. In the past about 10-15 years, a lot of research has been done because now we have a much better understanding of neuroscience, the way the brain works. And this lady, Tanya Singer, she's a German scientist, together with her team, she received a big grant from the European Union to study the functioning of the brain. And what I'm going to share is the result of her research. Here you see her also at the World Economic Forum, sharing the outcome of her research with the highest decision makers of the world. And so what she observed is that the skill that underlies all the others is our ability to focus our attention consciously. And you see, we live in an age of distraction. Yeah. All the teachers know that the attention span is becoming very, very short. It's really difficult to keep the attention of the students. We are constantly distracted by our screens. So our attention is like scattered. So the first thing is, if we want to have self-awareness, if we want to have empathy, we have to be able to focus our attention. And it's the same than what Professor Petro was saying, behavioral coaching is not enough. It's not enough to tell the children, okay, be quiet and listen. It doesn't work. If the attention is scattered, just telling them be quiet and listen won't work. You have to teach them how to listen, to teach them how to be quiet, to teach them how to be attentive. It's a skill. Attention is a skill. And so the result of the research that I was mentioning show a number of positive outcomes of attention training, awareness training in the field of concentration, attention, stress reduction, emotional balance, and so on. So the idea is that we can teach children how to focus their awareness, their attention. And there are very simple techniques that we have used in many, many schools in Europe, in the US, in Bhutan, in Vietnam, that are simple and very effective, and we will share them with you tomorrow. But again, first the teachers have to practice it themselves. If they don't practice themselves, they cannot teach us to the students. Now, we also mentioned that the third dimension of happiness and well-being is our connection with nature. And now there's been a lot of research that has shown the contrary, which is when there is no connection with nature, then it creates really big problems, mental and physical problems. And so part of a happy school program is to create situations where children can reconnect with nature, not just in the classroom speaking about, but really with the hands in the dirt, in the soil, knowing how does a plant grow. Again, in the old days it happened naturally in the village, but now we have to create it consciously, otherwise children can spend their whole childhood without ever having really observed how a plant grows, never put their hands in the soil, and then they get disconnected, and if they're that disconnected, how can you expect them to take care of nature? So in Hue, we have encouraged all the school to have, even if this is very small, a place where the children can really connect with nature, grow a little flowers or plants, and we also have a big garden, organic garden, where the children can come in our Peaceful Bamboo Family community, and we have thousands of kids who come and learn how to grow vegetables, harvest, or take care of different plants. We also have cows and chicken, and so this connection with nature.
Tháng 4 năm 2018 đến tháng 5 năm 2022, 9 trường tiểu học, trung học cơ sở, trung học phổ thông trên địa bàn thành phố Huế đã tiến hành thí điểm triển khai trường học hạnh phúc. Đây là dự án được hỗ trợ thực hiện bởi giáo sư Hà Vĩnh Thọ và Học viện Eurasia vì hạnh phúc và an sinh. Do đó, đã có những thầy cô giáo tại Huế được tham gia các khóa tập huấn với giáo sư Hà Vĩnh Thọ để được hiểu về hạnh phúc và thực hành đưa hạnh phúc vào trường học bằng những hoạt động cụ thể. Các thầy cô giáo được hướng dẫn các kỹ năng để nâng cao kỹ năng cảm xúc xã hội và sau đó sẽ hướng dẫn các kỹ năng này cho các em học sinh của mình.
So to summarize, Happy School in Vietnam is a program, it's a teacher training program basically, so that the teacher can learn to practice and embody these qualities so that they can spread in the schools. So we started in Hue, now we also have some pilots in Hanoi and Ba Dinh district. We are doing that in several countries. Right in this weekend, we have a big event in Switzerland with also hundreds of teachers following, just like you. So it's really becoming an international movement. And so, practically speaking, it's to develop practical methods, pedagogical tools that enable the schools, the teacher, to implement these 3 levels of connection to self, to others, and to nature. And so finally, our hope is that, as I said, that this is like what we're doing these 2 days is like planting seeds. And then if we nurture it together, then a beautiful garden could grow out of it that will bring happiness and well-being to many, many children all over Vietnam. Hopefully, all of our children, because it's not for the happy few, it's for everyone. So I hope now you all feel like gardeners responsible to water and nurture the seed of happiness for all the children.
Và bây giờ cũng giống như là phần trao đổi của giáo sư Petro thì em cũng rất là mong là sẽ đón nhận được những cái quan tâm và chia sẻ, những cái thắc mắc hoặc những câu hỏi, những cái điều tâm đắc nhất cũng như là những cái trăn trở của các thầy cô.
Em cũng rất ấn tượng với bài chia sẻ đầu của thầy với một cái câu nói đấy là chúng ta muốn dạy cái gì thì chúng ta phải có cái đó. Và khi đến cái bài chia sẻ thứ hai thì em cũng lại vô cùng chạm với một cái thông điệp đấy là chúng ta phải thực sự là biết yêu thương bản thân mình, yêu thương cái cộng đồng, yêu thương người khác và đặc biệt là yêu thiên nhiên.
Sau khi nghe hai bài giảng của hai giáo sư thì tôi thấy có một số cái băn khoăn và thầy cũng học được rất nhiều. Cả hai giáo sư đều nói đến một cái điều mà lâu nay trong các trường của chúng ta không có, hướng dẫn cho giáo viên rèn luyện cái cảm xúc. Và cái này là khó bởi vì trong trường chưa bao giờ dạy cái điều này. Hiện nay thì cái việc khen thưởng từ trung ương cho đến địa phương, có thành tích về học sinh giỏi thì mới được khen, còn không có thì không có tên trong cái chỗ mà khen thưởng. Thì vậy cái này, cái khen đó nó có phù hợp với cái việc ta xây dựng trường học hạnh phúc hay không? Và nếu có thì sắp tới bên Cục Nhà giáo sẽ có thay đổi như thế nào? Xin cảm ơn.
Có Cục trưởng Cục Nhà giáo ở Việt Nam cũng mong rằng là trong chương trình đào tạo các sinh viên sư phạm, chúng ta hãy dành một học phần, và theo tôi nghĩ nó là phải từ năm thứ nhất, một học phần về đào tạo kỹ năng cảm xúc xã hội, để những giáo viên khi họ ra trường thì họ đã có một cái kỹ năng này rồi, lúc đó mới truyền tải được cho các thế hệ sau. 400 người ở đây chỉ là một con số rất nhỏ trong số tất cả hàng vạn giáo viên của chúng ta. Và những người như thế này mà hiệu trưởng mà nếu như chúng ta về truyền đạt mà nó không khéo thì đôi lúc lại giáo viên bảo là tạo thêm áp lực cho họ nữa. Đấy cũng là một cái câu chuyện đấy, và cũng rất mong muốn rằng trong việc hoạch định chính sách thì Bộ Giáo dục chúng ta cần có những cái cách thức mà phải thay đổi về mặt cơ chế và chính sách để tạo một cái hành lang rất là tốt cho giáo dục của chúng ta. Xin cảm ơn.
I think that there's two levels of change. One is the top down and one is the bottom up. And the question is what the right balance is between. So if you just wait for the ministry to tell you, maybe it's not enough. Maybe you have to start here and now. Tomorrow, on Monday when you come back to your school, don't wait for the ministry. Start right away. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what we try to do is to create like experiment labs, small scale. But we have done that already in Vietnam for over 4 years now. So we have examples that and in a lab, you see what works. You also have some failures, that's fine. So try to experiment. And we are also happy to connect those who have already done it so that you can learn from the experimentation that has been already done. The third thing is that it's very difficult if you do it alone. You need a network, you need a movement, you need friends to support you. So try, I hope that at the end of this 2 days, it's the beginning of a network of people who support each other, who stay in contact, there's some kind of follow-up. Otherwise, after a while, you get discouraged if you're alone with that. So please, you be aware that it needs a community to change the way we teach.
Hôm nay rất cảm ơn hai giáo sư đã có hai chuyên đề rất là tuyệt vời. Và tôi tâm đắc hai điều. Điều thứ nhất đó là giáo sư Piccho đã chỉ ra được một cái nền giáo dục mà buồn bã, điên rồ và tồi tệ. Và cái này thì giáo dục Việt Nam đã thực hiện để thay đổi, đó là chúng ta đã thực hiện chương trình giáo dục phổ thông 28. Nhưng tôi trăn trở thế này, nếu như mà Việt Nam cũng như Hàn Quốc, Trung Quốc mà đang còn thí cử như thế này thì nhà trường, giáo viên và học sinh không thể hạnh phúc được. Bởi vì thế nào, thí thế nào thì học thế đó, lại phải lo luyện, lại phải tiếp tục lại học ngày học đêm để nó thí làm sao thủ khoa, để làm sao vào đại học được điểm cao. Và thí đó là thí của kiến thức chứ không phải thí của năng lực phẩm chất. Cái thứ hai là tôi cũng rất là tâm đắc, đó là cái dạy học cảm xúc. Cái này đúng thật, từ trước lâu nay chúng ta chưa bao giờ gọi tên nó ra và nó cực kỳ quan trọng. Mà chúng ta biết rằng cái cảm xúc này nó chính là sản sinh ra những nhân tài hơn nhau là chỗ cảm xúc. Cùng là có người một bùng chữ nhưng không làm thơ được là bởi vì thiếu cảm xúc. Đấy. Cùng như thế cả nhưng có cảm xúc là khác. Một buổi sáng lên trường mà có cảm xúc khác thì rất cảm ơn các giáo sư đã chỉ ra cái này. Và chúng tôi thì cũng đã thực hiện thôi. Thay đổi hàng ngày, chỉ cần một ngày đến trường mà hiệu trưởng chỉ cần cười thôi thì nụ cười đó sẽ đến với hội đồng giáo viên. Và hội đồng giáo viên sẽ đưa đến với học sinh. Và học sinh hạnh phúc và cả trường hạnh phúc. Và nếu như hôm đó mà hiệu trưởng một cái gì đó khuôn mặt hình viên đàn chẳng hạn thì đến hội đồng cũng thế và đến các em cũng thế, và đó cũng là mầm móng của bạo lực học đường, cùng đó là mất đoàn kết là chính chỗ đó, và chúng ta phải thay đổi cảm xúc này. Tôi xin cảm ơn ạ.
Em cảm ơn thầy.
I see this panel here. It says happiness is a choice. See, you already made a choice to come here. I'm sure there are many more principles in Vietnam. Some principles chose not to change. but you chose to make some changes. You have to make one more choice today. I know that you are one of the top intellectuals in Vietnam, brightest intelligence. You can use that to analyze the difficulties that's waiting for you to implement happiness in your school. I know that you can come up easily with 400 good reasons why it is going to be difficult. And each one of the reasons are very good reasons and realistic reasons. But you can choose to use your brain to think about and to discuss how you can implement programs, even small programs in your schools. I know those small changes are not enough, but I also know those small changes are something that you can choose to make work. If you don't implement small changes because it's too small, then the big changes will never come. So I hope that we all make a good choice today and tomorrow to talk about possibilities. When you think about possibilities, you will become happy. And when you take that happiness back to your school, then the real changes will begin. Choice for happiness.
Hội thảo thay đổi vì một trường học hạnh phúc với chủ đề Chọn yêu thương, chọn hạnh phúc năm 2022 do kênh truyền hình giáo dục quốc gia VTV7 Đài truyền hình Việt Nam và thương hiệu Love Hạnh phúc là lựa chọn của công ty cổ phần sữa quốc tế IDP phối hợp tổ chức cùng với sự đồng hành của Bộ Giáo dục và Đào tạo. Toàn bộ các phần trình bày và thảo luận sẽ được phát sóng trên kênh YouTube của VTV7. Các thầy cô giáo, các nhà quản lý giáo dục, các khán giả quan tâm có thể theo dõi.